And and I can also say that I think it's probably the most squared away process. So we're very fortunate to have the team taking this so seriously and doing their best. And with that background, I will turn it over to the USACE team to talk about this, and then they're going to do a presentation, and I do believe they're going to solicit your questions as well. So I'm going to turn it over first to Mr. Hector Cruz, who is the chief of the AE construction contract management group, as well as the value engineering and the cost engineering section. So Hector, over to you, please. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I just want to, welcome you again, like Margaret just said, and thank you for the input on the survey. We got some good questions, and we'll try to answer them and actually take in the input to improve, obviously. As we move through 2022, we will need, obviously, the partnership of the AE that are out there, so to complete our mission. So this process that Margaret was talking about, the selection process contains this torn inside of it. Is a step of the selection process, and we will have questions because it obviously affects the way we select AEs. So today we have a brief presentation from Mr. Ian Maxfield, is our new AE team lead, and he will be presenting an overview of the task order requirement notice, and he'll provide a little bit of time at the end for questions. Also want to state that John Benson's the Chief of Engineering. He's also online, so we will be online and supporting Ian and during this presentation, and be available for the questions also. So that's all I have. So from there we go with Ian Maxfield.
Okay, thank you so much. So as Hector said, I do have a quick presentation to talk about our selection process. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to start off with a quick overview of what our current selection process is, and then I'm going to review some of the survey results that we had. So a quick overview of the selection process. As Margaret mentioned, this was first implemented in 2020, so we are about 2 years into it. We have this implementation of this selection process. The major change that we had in 2020 was the addition of the TORN, which is the task order request notification. The intention of this, per the USACE Director's Policy Memo, is to increase competition between AEs, to have a chance for the pool of AEs to know about a specific upcoming project, and be able to put their best forward by providing a supplemental information to their SF330s. The updated policy in 2021 has directed us to, when we're working with pools of AEs, to use multiple award task order contracts, or MATOCs. So the Europe district, we have set up MATOCs that are geography based. So generally one or a couple of countries will be covered by a single MATOC. We solicit those base contract MATOCs that have a shared capacity. For each of those MATOCs, we have an SF330 that was provided for the original base contract, and then for each project that we'll award a task order on, we send a TORN notice to the pool from that MATOC based off the geography, and the response for that TORN will be used as supplemental information to the SF330 in our selection process. Our goal is always to find the most highly qualified AE to do the job. Another item I want to highlight from the new policy memo is that AE firms are encouraged to provide us updates to their SF330s annually. Our MATOCs here in Europe are 5-year contracts. And so, in that 5 years, your firm's information will have updated. You'll have new projects that you'll want to highlight, new completed projects that you want to highlight, and you may have new personnel and engineers, architects whose resumes you want to have on file. So you are encouraged to provide updated SF330s to the contracting team. That will be reviewed by the engineering team and then included in your contract folder. Next slide, please. So this is a quick review or summary of the steps that the Corps of Engineers goes through to select an AE for a specific project. The first step that we do is that we finalize a description of the work. That would be, understanding from us a high-level understanding of what the design contract is going to be. Once we have that description of work, we select a pool of AEs who will receive the torn. Like I said, that pool is defined by geography, by the MATOCs that we have set up. Once we have that pool selected, we issue the torns to the AEs. And then, generally speaking, 1 to 2 weeks to respond to, depending on the complexity of the project. We'll solicit responses from the AEs, their project-specific supplemental information to the SF330s. Your district will then convene a evaluation panel who will evaluate the SF330s and the torn responses, and in order to make a selection of the most highly qualified AE. Once we have that selection made, we finalize our RFP package to include finalizing the scope of work. And when the selected firm will receive an RFP, a request for price proposal, the non-selected firms will receive a notice of non-selection at that point. A's are welcome and encouraged to request debriefs from the Corps of Engineers, whether you're selected or not selected, and we will be happy to provide those debriefs. Next slide, please. So a survey was sent out with questions on the FY21 selection process. And there were some common themes in the responses they received. So I wanted to kind of highlight some of those common themes that I found. The first is there were multiple requests for USACE to publish a forecast of the upcoming task orders, thus the upcoming torrents that will be submitted. And this is something that we will do. I don't have that forecast to provide to you today, but that forecast will be published to the Europe District website in the next week. There was comments from the survey to provide more detailed project information in the torn. So I think that there was a concern that some of the torns we went out, the project was very general and vague, and the A's weren't aware of exactly what the project was asking for. Specifically, we had multiple comments asking for programmed amounts for the projects to have a better understanding of what the size of the project is that we're asking for. So that is something that we'll look at in order to make sure that our torns do have enough detailed information for the AEs to completely understand what the project is. Overall, we received positive comments on the formatting of the torn. There were some requests to have more consistent formatting across USACE districts. That every district is allowed to have their own format, but we do have conversations between within our districts to try lessons learned. Some A's requested a standard torn response template. At this point, we have not provided a standard template to the AEs, just a page limit. There were comments that the time allowed to respond to the torns was not always sufficient, especially when a large batch of torns are sent out at once. So this is something that we will review on a case-by-case basis, making sure that we allow enough time for response. I think that really comes down to the project to understand how difficult that project would be, whether if we're looking for specialized information, and also we would be taking into account how many torns we have sent out, at a single time, and whether or not additional time needs to be added. There were comments on the survey about timely notice of selection and non-selection. I think that this was an issue in FY21, that the time between the torn being sent to AEs and the actual RFP being sent out would sometimes stretch into 1, 2, or even 3 months. We are shortening that timeline this year to avoid having, because we don't want to leave the AEs, we don't want to leave you kind of guessing whether or not those resources need to stay on hand, or if you can move those resources to other projects. Also press for timely debriefs. Once again, we are happy to provide debriefs when they're requested, and we are required to do prompt debriefs, and we'll move forward with doing prompt debriefs in FY22. There are other comments about providing debrief notes, which I think can be a very prior to it, some written notes for the debrief. I think that can be a very useful tool as well. This last comment, there were comments that some firms were concerned that the criteria written in the torn was written to be skewed to specific firms. I'd like to say that the intention of our selection process and the torn notice is to increase competition. We're always trying to find the most highly qualified firm and give firms a chance to express why they are the most highly qualified. Our torn criteria is written to be project specific, and we are trying to be very precise with what specialized experience we are looking for to have a successful project. Next slide, please. So for this slide, I want to highlight some best practices that you can use when preparing your torn response. And the first is to have a direct response addressing the project-specific information that is in the torn. As I just said, that criteria that we put into the torn is project-specific. We are trying to distill it down to what elements we think make for a most highly qualified AE. So to be selected for that particular project, we'd be looking for firms who are able to show that they meet the criteria written in that specific torn. Our standard criteria is specialized experience, professional qualifications, past performance, knowledge of locality, technical approach, and the capacity to perform the work. As always with any proposal, it's important that your responses be easy to read and uncluttered. And as I said, please in your torn responses, address the specific requirements that we have written in the torn. And I also like to reiterate that annual updates of the SF330 are an excellent way to get your relevant recent projects on file, as well as your current staffing and resumes on file. Next slide. So some improvements that the Europe District is working on for the torrents of FY22. We're looking at making sure that our torrents are clearly written, that we're minimizing the chances of multiple interpretations, and that the criteria are right do drill down to the specific criteria we need for this project. The second improvement, as I stated before, is we're working on our timely notifications of selections so that you would not have extended periods of time between responding to a torrent and knowing whether or not you were or were not selected. Those selection notifications, whether you are selected or not selected, would come out with the RFPs, so reducing the time. So we are working to reduce our time between the torrent being issued and the RFP being issued. Another process improvement for FY22 is we would like to make it standard practice to have a scoping meeting with the AE, with the selected AE once the RFP is issued. That scoping meeting would be after RFP is issued and prior to the price proposal being submitted. This way that the selected AE has a chance to ask questions, more directed questions on the project, and put together the best possible price proposal. Next slide, please. So in summary, we are continuing to use torrents as part of our selection process for FY22. And all the feedback that we receive from the survey is greatly appreciated, and we are using that feedback to improve our process for FY22. Like I said, our largest areas of improvement here would be clarity in the torrent on the project and the timeliness of the selection notifications and timeliness of debriefs. Next slide, please. So we have a few upcoming AE May talks in FY22. These are covering countries where we have expiring base contracts. So the next May talk that you'll see going out solicitation will be for Italy. That solicitation should be submitted in February with a target to award contracts in July of 2022. And then in March, we'll be soliciting proposals for MATOCs in Turkey and for a MATOC in Slovakia. For both of those, we're targeting award in August 2022. And then in April, there'll be a solicitation for the AFRICOM-based contract with a target to award that in November 2022. Let's see, so there's a question of how many awardees for each upcoming MATOC. We would be targeting between 3 to 5.
So Ian, if you're done with the briefing, I'm thinking that they're having trouble in the room. They can only see the slides but not faces. So I'm thinking that for the rest of this, while we're doing Q&A, if you were to turn off your quit sharing slides, then the audience will see the faces of whoever's got their camera on, which can be you and John and Hector, and I can be on to facilitate questions if that's okay with you. I think John thought that would be okay.
Yep, that should be okay. I think Charisse has this slides on, is sharing her slide deck.
Okay. So it'll
So
be
if
they
you'd like to
will
stop
have
sharing and go to the
stop
videos,
sharing.
that's perfectly acceptable.
Right. And then also there is an issue. So Sharice or Scott, I don't think I need to share the slides because we don't need the slides. So if you just stop sharing, I think the pictures will pop up. And just put the, you have to put the meeting up as the go-to meeting. If you click on the go-to meeting at the bottom of the screen. All the way at the bottom. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And then what you can do is you can select who is displayed. Would be active cameras. So if you go to the middle of the screen at the top, and it, or I think everybody can do that, is each individual person can go to the top middle and choose active cameras. There you go. I see it looks like the screen in the room has the active camera. So now the last question is, do we have a way to allow the audience in the room to speak? Because there's a microphone issue. Maybe if that microphone on your computer's not working, maybe somebody else could just call in on their phone and pass the phone around. I'm trying to be creative here.
Yeah, we can do we could do a phone, or we could, if someone wants to type questions into the chat, I'll be happy to, read the questions and then provide answers as well.
Yeah, that part's easy. Yeah, I guess Scott, if you're sitting at Sharice's machine, you could type in the questions that people speak in the room. How's that? So maybe while we're waiting, because we know they can hear us, I will ask a couple questions. So
okay, can you guys hear from here? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll do this two ways. I've got my laptop mic on, so if the people in the room have a question, if you would mind stepping over here. I'll kick it off if I could, and then Tim, you'll follow me. On the AE
and Sharice,
contracts that are coming out, the last slide, can you tell us what the size range of those contracts is going to be?
Yes, so there will be $10 million MATOX shared capacity. And so that would be for Italy, Slovakia, and AFRICOM. Did I miss one?
We're going to get on camera.
And this is Tim. Thanks for the presentation. Appreciate that. I had one question in terms of debriefs. We've been given a couple of answers on that, in that we've been told it's the discretion of the PM if they want to give a debrief, because we've requested a couple, and normally we get them and get great information on those, but there's been a couple where we were not given a debrief because we were told it was up to the PM's discretion if they wanted to do it or not. But you said you're obligated to do it. I just want a little clarity on that. Thanks.
So if you request a debrief, then we will give you a debrief. I'm sorry if some of them were missed. It's a requirement for us to provide a debrief for any contract action over $5.5 million, which the majority of area contracts are below that. So the debriefs will only be given if they're requested by the AE.
Okay.
Anybody else in the room?
I'll go ahead, Sharice. Earlier, Hector had made a comment in the chat about the SF330 update process. Hector, you said part 2, the update is part 2 and not the whole document. Do you want to clarify that, please?
Yeah, all you're doing is updating the qualifications, like Ian also mentioned, you're updating the resumes and projects that are recently completed, that kind of information that normally is in part 2. So you don't have to submit the whole thing.
So Hector, just to clarify, I think you mean part 1 is where the resumes and projects and all go. The part 2 is your list of each company's
Okay.
number of disciplines. So, but is it not?
Yeah. Updating resumes, projects, that kind of stuff that really will make a difference between one year to the other. That kind of information that, you know, it's good to have, you know, obviously the most recent stuff when doing the selection.
So I will ask a question about that. When we, because I've run into this problem myself. So as you know, that when you're updating an SF330, the things that are changing most quite often are your qualifications, your projects, and your people. So you want to add those projects that you've just recently completed. However, the requirement originally to put a project in would be that you had to have it complete and with a CPARS rating. So sometimes we're stymied by the fact that we haven't received our CPARS in a timely manner in order to put in an important project. So then we are holding our SF330 update trying to get that CPARS. I state that, like, I guess the question is can we go ahead and submit it without the CPARS, especially if it's from Europe District, and then you'll accept that knowing that you're going to get us the CPARS eventually.
We have a backlog on CPAS, and we'll be working on it seriously to improve. So we're working on that also.
So we can go ahead and submit even though we don't have the CPARS rating on the projects.
Yes, you know, if these are projects that, you know, normally we will look at the CPARS anyway, eventually, and, you know, if it's a project with us, we obviously know what the performance.
Super.
Yeah. Please submit that with this. Even the CPAR is still pending. We want to see, you know, the recent projects that you're highlighting. Once again, you're already in the pool, so I guess some of the. I think it would be no problem at all for us to receive that project without the CPARS rating. It will just, you know, be neutral, past performance.
Okay, thanks. And as I recall, the guidance last year was that we could add a total of an additional 5 pages over what we had submitted previously on the SF330.
Additional.
Can't hear you.
I'm actually not aware of that page limit count being limited.
There was some guidance that came out a year ago or early in 2021. I can reshare it with the district if you want. And I just think this is a process that does, you know, from the AE side can be confusing for some.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. Can't hear you, John.
You can hold up cards. Okay, I'm looking.
You can write in the chat if you want. If that will work too.
I see in the chat that Miroslav Kirka is commending the district for providing torn debriefs, which is not the case at every district. That's true. And yeah. And then someone from the Ashbourne office is asking if the district will be providing a list of expected torns similar to what has been put out previously.
Yes, we will publish the forecasted torn, our forecast for the torns of FY22. We'll publish that on our website in the next week or two.
And then Sharice Knotts said that updating resumes by default also will make changes to the org chart. So we should need to resubmit that as well. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that org chart is a very useful document. So having update org charts would be very useful to Europe District.
And John Benson writes that the SF330s can be updated every 12 months. And then per the February 2021 memo, that's the one I think I was thinking of, complete new resubmission to minor changes only are allowed. And up to 5 extra pages per resubmission, right? Recognizing that you're going to have perhaps more, and you don't want to rewrite the whole thing to get back into the original page count. It is a big process. But I think the district, you've brought this up enough times that it's clear that it's something that would be helpful, especially under the torn process. Okay. So we've got 46 people logged in. Encourage people to ask your questions now. This is an unprecedented chance to have a good dialogue. Or I think just give your comments to the district. I think the process has come a long way in 2 years. It's certainly a learning process for everyone, but I think it's settling. Here's a question. Would you announce yourself, who you are and what company you're from?
So Brian Osborne from CDM Smith. In the presentation, you mentioned timely response, timely notification, and timely briefings. I want to say that AEs are used to using weasel words, but do you have sort of a guidance as to what timely will mean? What are you aiming at for that?
Yeah, so our guidance says prompt. So we don't have, we do not have a specific number of days that we're required to do it. For, throughout the year, for the torrents that we'll be submitting this quarter and next quarter, for me, I would like to have those debriefs completed, within 10 days of the request, which is generally what the FAR requires. End of year September rush, those debriefs are going to be happening in October at the earliest.
Okay, thanks.
Lawrence Frank wrote, just to follow up on Mr. Benson's comments, are we allowed 5 pages in the annual SF330 update? Is that correct? And John responded that 5 additional pages are allowed in addition to the original page limit listed in the synopsis.
So I've tried to come back on. Can you hear me now?
You can hear you
Yes,
now.
yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
Perfect.
great. Sorry about that. I don't know what the deal is with my microphone, but the February 2021 guidance, yeah, we just want to allow some leeway so that if the firm just simply wants to add a little bit of extra information, they have a new sub, they have a couple of new relevant projects, and leave the rest of it alone, that's fine. So that's why we allowed a little bit of extra pages to be submitted. So if the original synopsis says it's a 75-page limit, then 12 months later, you could give us an 80-page updated SF330, and subsequently, after that, you could add 5 more pages if you just want to make it cumulative. We tried to leave the guidance for SF330 resubmission open enough to give you lots of flexibility, so that it's up to you if you just want to augment and update, or if you want a complete overhaul because you have that many changes to list, then it's up to you and your firm.
John, maybe if it suits you, you could post that guidance on your website.
Yes, we can. I can.
That way it would always sit there and it would be available to everyone.
We sent it out to all of our POCs in late March, in late February or March, but we can certainly just post it, I think.
Oh, I see it got sent out by Lisa Buffington on the 12th of February to current contractors. I just found it.
Yeah.
There are questions. Let's see. Any questions on Torrance? Or any suggestions? Maybe you didn't put something in your survey, but you'd like to share it now.
And maybe give a chance for people to think of a question if they have something to say, but if I can just take this opportunity, I think we had around 52 responses in that Torn survey. It looks like, I think 36 of them were from the AEs. And I just do want to iterate that we appreciate your input and taking the time to give us that information in those responses. And I think it's an important part of us having try to make this presentation as worthwhile, address your points, and have that meaningful dialogue, so we can maintain our working relationships and kind of where we know where things are. So it's something that we've worked together a lot to stand up, and I do feel like we're in a pretty good place, and just appreciate your taking the time to give us the feedback and this opportunity for our team to make this presentation.
So I've got a question. So we AEs, we produce these Torn responses to the best of our abilities, and most of us ask for debriefs, and we listen carefully, and we adjust our responses according to what we're learning. But it's still sort of a shot in the dark. And if you win, you're doing something right. If you don't, you're not sure. So what I'm wondering is what kind of feedback you can give the AE community in general about these responses. Number one, in terms of how to make them more useful to your panel that's evaluating them. For instance, I've been told, it's really helpful when you bold or highlight certain items. It just speeds up their job. Another piece of feedback I think would be helpful is like other thoughts, like are we overdoing it? These take a lot of effort to put together. So if there's things we're doing that in general you could speak about that are just not necessary, and would save us some time if we could quit doing them, that would be really helpful. I know early on in the process, you came out with a guidance that the photographs and graphics and all that are just not necessary. Okay, good. Take that off the table. But what other sorts of things are you seeing that just are not value added?
So, yeah, that's a great question. And so the most essential part of any torn is the list of specialized experience that's project specific. So, if it's, have you had experience, whatever we're doing, a renovating the electrical system of a operations of some sort of DoD facility, So it's very important to show that your firm has experience doing designs that are specific to the project that we're talking about. And that's where the SF330 itself isn't going to provide us very much information, because your SF330 was very broad in scope, and you only had potentially six example projects to try to show your broad scope of what your firm can do. So we would really like to see, is there an additional project that your firm has done, because you guys have done many projects, that show your specific ability on the specialized experience that we've written down on the torn. The second most important aspect of the torn selection is the professional qualifications. It's usually written generally as, we need engineers and architects, but it's useful to see the team that you'd be proposing for this project and tying that team to your firm's example project, showing that those engineers have done this specific work before. If you have team members on your torn response who are on your SF330, but you want to bring them up again now in order to highlight that they have this other specific experience that may not have been highlighted in SF330, it would be a good idea to put that in the torn response. If you have team members who are not on your SF330, then we'll need a little bit additional resume data, telling us what their qualifications are, professional qualifications, as well as years of experience. For writing in a narrative about, for your past performance, please give us any, if you know your CPARS ratings for something, it's helpful to put that in the torn response. We do look into our own CPARS systems, but we have there are a lot of contractual relationships here. A lot of firms, you have JVs, you have multiple cage codes. So go ahead and highlight your positive past performance in your torn response. When we're looking for the technical approach for this task order, it's really specifically if they're about this particular task order. We know that each one of you are qualified, highly qualified to do design, that you understand design, you just understand QC. So in the torn response, we're looking for what is your approach to this task order? Timing wise, how are you going to get the people together to show up to that kickoff meeting and design charrette? If there's something interesting about this task order that's going to require additional coordination from the project manager, and that's something you can highlight in your torn response. So it's very, really want to keep it project specific, because the SF330 already explains your overall design approach and project execution approach. So those are comments that are that I've given multiple times to people in debriefs.
Okay. We've got some questions in the chat. Vinny Placido from WSP asks, with the subsequent SF330 submissions, I guess he means the updates, will additional projects be considered in addition to the original synopsis, or will only a certain number of projects within the original limit be considered? And if so, how to determine? So I think what he's asking is, if you were allowed to submit 10 projects in your first one, can you now add 5 more? Or do you need to take out 5 and replace with 5?
Right. Yeah, you're allowed to add 5 more. I mean,
Yep.
when
I don't know
you
if you folks can
provide
hear
me
me,
with,
but yes.
Okay, and I
Go ahead,
think
John.
that's spoken to in the guidance that John's putting on the website. Miroslav,
Whatever additional content you want to put in those 5 additional pages is fine.
okay, and then Miroslav Kirka writes, one of the biggest concerns that AE firms have is the equitable distribution of task orders. Now that you've been doing TORNs for a while, are you finding that the distribution of awards is fairly broad or across the board? Or are 1 or 2 firms winning most of the work?
Sure. So we are still showing that firms are getting work, that we're distributing work across different firms. And we definitely, our plan is still, or our goal is still have competition, still have a good pool of firms. That's why we have a pool. So I have not seen that just 1 or 2 firms are getting all of the work.
Okay. I don't see a question, another question on there. I'd like to ask, go back to the AE IDIQs that are coming. Little Birdie told me those you might be getting some help from another district to award, to procure those contracts on your behalf. Is that true? And if so, will that make any difference to anybody? Will Europe people be part of the panel, etc.?
It won't make any difference. The district that's helping us is only helping us on the work that we have as the engineering part, that part. But we will be participating in negotiations, and the contract will be awarded in your district. All the contracting portion is being done here. They're just helping us, because we have limitation of resources. But the process is basically the same for anybody, in those pools.
One thing I've seen over the years when that's been done in the past is the stateside districts get confused about the requirement for small business contracting. Sometimes they incorporate that into their solicitation, and it causes confusion.
These contracts will come, like I said, to the district anyway. We're going to go through all our normal reviews. Our contracting people will review it, our OC, all that process is staying here. So it should have no problems. And the district that's helping us has experience with overseas. So I don't expect any issues. Should be something seamless, and nobody should see a difference.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else with questions? So,
something, one second, on what Ian was saying. Is very useful, all the stuff that he's saying about the TORN process. But I also want to, let everybody know that we really take this very seriously. We read absolutely everything you send us. There's nothing that we don't look at. We go back to your 330s. So it's a very, very intensive process for us, but we go through it and we make sure that we're making the decision that is, the really most highly qualified person, firm. So this is a process that we don't take lightly. We take it very seriously, and that's why when you guys do a request for a debrief, we are available to debrief. And I'm sure it's not perfect. Some of those debriefs are being long waited. And we are working on getting that better. Like Ian was saying, we are working on having additional staff and additional resources that will help us do those debriefs sooner. So We are listening. We are listening on all your comments. We're listening on the survey, and we're trying to improve little by little. Like Margaret was saying, this process started in 2020, and it's been improving little by little. And I expect it to get better as we go along.
I think it definitely is. Is there any questions otherwise on the, oh, I'm sorry, there's one more thing posted from Chris Carloni in Golder. How important is work done at DoD facilities within the torn selection process? From past torn debriefs, it appeared that past experience at DoD installations versus very similar work, but for non-military clients, resulted in not being selected. Seems a catch-22 situation for experienced firms who are lacking extensive DoD experience to be able to win and develop a military portfolio.
Sure. That's a really good question. And in Europe District, we have a very unique design challenge, which is that we are building facilities for the DoD, for the US DoD, but we have to also understand host nation design criterias. So all the firms that have been put onto the MATOC have that ability and have shown that skill, and it's also brought up on every torn because it's truly one of the most difficult design process, a very difficult part of our process here in Europe District.
And we've talked about that sort of thing when we're, taking a step back to look at the distribution of work and how that works. Sometimes when we do set that criteria, I know that in most cases that I've seen, it's imperative. Maybe there's a special access requirement or other local things that come into play where that gives us confidence that this is going to be the right firm for that particular project and facility and timing. So that's kind of what's coming into play when we have to. And we've talked about internally ways we can maybe step back from that at times to kind of get us a little further away from that catch-22 that Chris, I know exactly what you're talking about, because it's really in everyone's interest for us to make sure to keep a broad swath of eligible firms, keep them active, and it's good for our pool of firms and good for us as well.
Yeah, so I think that is a really good comment. I was to follow up on that. It might be that a specific project may be similar in country is more important than similar DoD, and that's something that we need to be looking at on the torn as we write it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Regarding the upcoming Turkey IDIQ, there have been issues concerning the requirements for registration of the firms. Has that been resolved, and can you give us the requirements? Or because I see that you've listed as being ready for solicitation in March.
From engineering's point of view, that is a major hurdle that still has to be resolved. We're confident that it will be, and there's going to be some way. And what we're doing with the schedule is just laying the groundwork so that we have capability when we need it. There's clear indication that more Turkey work will be coming, and we need to ensure that we have capacity. So the access and the eligibility to work in that country is frankly, still yet to be completely resolved. But I think we're on a path with our latest effort. I don't know, Lala, it looks like you're dialed in. I don't know if there's any news you might have that I've missed. Well, maybe he's not.
The last I had
Able to
asked
pay
him,
attention.
he said it was still a due out question at UCOM.
Yeah.
Okay, Joe.
But like I
Joel-
said, we're kind of trying to figure it out with our most recent activity, and I think that might lay some groundwork, but it's a work in progress still.
Okay, in the chat,
Over.
Joel Putterman has stated a question. He says, related to equitable distribution of, are there targets for how much each firm would be awarded on an annual basis, or are there limits of annual dollar amounts to be awarded to the pool of firms or each specific firm? If a firm is awarded a certain volume of work previously, does that affect their ability to be selected for a particular torn?
So related to the equal distribution of work, and really at the this question kind of leads to the capacity. On our May talks, we have an expected amount of work that's written into the solicitation for that May talk. And the firms, when submitting their SF330 originally, have shown how they're going to get to that expected amount. So if a firm is being awarded contracts at a higher level than than they were, selected to be able to do, then that does cause a concern on their capacity. So that's in there. However, our goal for each individual torn selection is always to find the most highly qualified AE for that project.
So does that mean that there is not a constraint on you in making your selection, like a strict constraint that says I gotta stop awarding to this firm?
That's right. We don't have a strict constraint.
Okay. Joel, does that answer your question? I'll assume it. Yes, partially. Okay, so tell us more. This is the time to ask. We got a few more minutes. I'll ask it while we're waiting. I'll ask another question. Are you getting, and in a general sense, are you getting the amount of interest and competition in your solicitations that you're looking for? Are enough firms submitting? I'm not just talking the torns, I'm talking more the IDIQs, but you could answer any of it.
Yeah, I think that we have that we have interest from multiple firms, that we're able to have competition amongst the firms. Yes, that we are getting what we're looking for.
Good.
I would concur, and especially the last many base contracts that we've put out. Lots of submissions and lots of competition. Appreciate it.
So Joel is now clarifying. He said, so having previous award volume won't negatively affect selection if a firm is considered the highest qualified. So I think it's getting, might get at the capacity question too.
Yeah, so drilling down to it, if a firm is, is deemed to be the most technically, highly qualified on a technical aspect, then it will go to them. That is the Brook Act, and they will only if their capacity were to completely, if a firm is technically the highest qualified technical firm, it will go to them. They will not be disqualified based off of the number of task orders they have.
Okay, that generated another question. Go ahead and tell us who you are, please.
Hey, this is Chris too. If I might add to Ian's comment, architectural engineering contracts aren't quite like construction contracts where you have this third-party constraint with a bond or a bank letter or guarantee over here. But really, I guess to get to Joel's question, you have to show some level of professional judgment and restraint, because if you get too much work, you're the highly qualified firm and your performance slips, there's I hate to say punishment, but we're going to evaluate you accordingly, which can hurt you on future actions. So it's a complex problem, because I know a lot of this work is going on simultaneously, but I would caution anybody from chasing everything and getting everything can really create a capacity constraint within your own firm and then harm your ability to perform and meet our requirements. Hope that helps.
Chris, though, I would
That's a good
counter
point,
that with
Chris.
the fact that we often see dozens of torns long before we see any result. And so you don't know when you're going to overextend yourself because you don't know where you stand.
Right on. That's gets to the heart of, I think, your guys' communicated concerns, and that's with the timeliness issue. And we did allay that just a little bit because we're not exactly bound by timelines there, but please know the district's working on internal process revision to try to improve that. And I think another part of that is also to try to spread the work out more. This is the only organization I've ever worked in that does this much work in such a short period of time. So it stacks so much of that up on top of you folks. So Margaret, I totally get that. And we need to work with you to try to help there, forecast better, spread work out, that sort of stuff. So you're not conflicted and you're chasing everything at the same time, and you don't get too much work, because that's really, it sounds like it's great, but it can be a real negative thing. And we've seen that historically. If somebody gets too much, even a great firm has a capacity constraint, and we don't want to see anybody fail. We succeed together and fail together. Over.
And I'll just add one more thought to that is, as we get many dozens of torns working at the same time, we might have a person, particular discipline that, or a PM or something that would be just perfect for several of them. But then we worry if we put this person on too many, then you're going to say, oh, well, they're going to get picked and then they're going to be too busy. And so we're not going to give that next one to them, except you have no idea how many that person's going to end up, winning. So these are the kind of thoughts that go through AE mind.
Yeah, right on again. In fact, we can hold you to that, which make it a sort of an impossibility for you, and then you have to offer some alternative, and we may not like that. So yeah, we do understand it, and we look forward to further dialogue and work with you to get better so that we can help you win as much work as you can possibly do at the highest possible level for us as the most qualified firm. Over.
Good. So Joel writes again, can you clarify how capacity is determined, or how many task orders or size of task orders a firm is perceived to be able to perform?
So, like I said, what you're perceived to be able to perform is what you have proven in your SF30 response to the solicitation, where we have specifically asked you to show ability to perform some level. Every one of our solicitations says expect this, this many task orders at this dollar amount per year. And then determining whether or not you're at that capacity is merely just counting your task orders and the dollar value.
The task orders at Europe District on that,
Yes,
on that specific IDIQ.
correct. Thank you.
All right. Everybody's hanging on to the end, but I'm not seeing more questions. Let's go one last chance for questions or comments. Okay. So I think you know, Europe District has been very generous with their time and openness and feedback and answering questions. We really appreciate you all coming to engage with industry on this topic. I know for a fact it's going to make it better for all of us. And in the result, it's going to make it better for the Europe District mission. Charisse, actually Scott, I think, I'm sorry, Scott, our new president, I'd like to turn this back over to you for closing remarks and thanking our presenters, if you have a microphone.
Okay, so I'll just close this out. It's been a long day with a lot of information. I hope it was useful. I think it was by the amount of participation we had and stayed online even. So thank you. Thank you for the speakers with the torn. We'll have a digital voice for you, which I will pass back to your colleagues.
Roger and Chris.
I'll just make sure Roger actually.
Can't hear you.
That would be what we could do that, but if you could come up and accept them on behalf of them.